Willa and Maybeck occupied the back seat of one of the exploration vehicles inside the Dino Institute. The front seat stood empty, and given the size of the crowd, lined up for the ride. This should have told them something, but they'd been too preoccupied with Philby's instructions to pay much attention to anything beyond looking for doors offering employees backstage access. The ride was dark and very cold, with stunningly real dinosaurs appearing at every turn. Asteroids fell to Earth in a shower of fiber optics. The vehicle rounded a long turn. The prehistoric creatures looked up and turned toward the truck.
How are we going to do this? We can't jump from the car without setting off the alarms.
We'll find a way backstage. The trick is to know where we're going. The section is all the interior to the track. Philby said a workshop with a bathroom, so those rooms are going to be in spaces between the ride and the exterior walls, or currently to our left.
Are you sure about that?
I'm not sure about anything.
The next scene showed a Tyrannosaurus eating a lizard.
It's creepy the way their eyes move. It feels like they're looking right at.
But her words were cut off as the dinosaur's giant tail swiped over the engine of the open-topped vehicle. Maybeck reached out and pulled Willa down onto him a fraction of a second before the massive tail nearly beheaded her. The tail broke some of the equipment off the vehicle, and it tumbled to the track. Maybeck dared to sneak a look and pushed Willa back up.
Was that supposed to happen?
Maybeck pulled at a lap belt at his waist, and then he tried Willa's. The belts wouldn't release. They were locked shut. The kids couldn't jump out of the vehicle even if they wanted to.
I don't think so. No. I think that was intended for us. Heads up!
He glanced back. No vehicles in sight in either direction. The ride was designed so that no car ever saw another. There was no use calling out for help.
You remember Small World?
I was on Winnie the Pooh with Charlene. We nearly drowned, don't forget.
I haven't forgotten. My point is, I think this is like that.
I think you're right.
If they could have jumped from the car, the sensors would have stopped the ride, but the locked seatbelts prevented their escape. Suddenly, a pterodactyl shot down at them from out of the pitch-black ceiling. It was dark and angular, with the wingspan of over 6 feet. With its sharp talons extended, it descended too quickly for Maybeck to react, catching him by the wrist as he shielded his face from the attack. At the moment the talon grabbed hold of him, his seatbelt released, the timing too perfect to be coincidental. The bird locked onto his forearm and dragged him up and out of the vehicle. Willa screamed, spun, and grabbed him by the boots. Maybeck was now stretched between the overhead bird and Willa, still locked in her seat. Neither was willing to let go. He groaned in agony. It felt like every joint was separating simultaneously. He twisted his forearm to the left and then quickly to the right, breaking the bird's grip on him. The pterodactyl's long beak bent back to peck at Maybeck, but too late. Maybeck reached out and snapped the bird's leg at the knee. The creature cried out, flapped its wings, and was absorbed into the darkness of the ceiling. Was it alive? Willa pulled him down onto the back seat, but he avoided the seatbelt. The pterodactyl's broken leg in hand, Maybeck studied it. An electric wire extended from the broken knee.
You're bleeding.
He studied the 3 holes in his skin.
It doesn't hurt much. I'm fine.
It got you!
Dang right it did.
Only Maybeck didn't say dang.
This ride is trying to hurt us.
You think? You're not surprised by that, are you? There are sensors on every ride. Probably cameras too. Throw in a little artificial intelligence, and how hard can it be to program a server to defend itself?
You think the server is doing this?
I think it knows we mean business. It has every right to be scared. I'm gonna fry its innards when we find it.
But how?
She cut herself off as Maybeck stood up in the seat, grabbed a light, and turned it to show them something on the track in front of them. Back behind the jungle plants, he illuminated a black door and a disguised device protruding from beside it.
10 to 2. That's a cart reader. That's our way in.
But I'm stuck.
Willa reminded him, indicating the locked seatbelt. She pulled and squirmed, but there wasn't any way she was going to slip out of its grip. Maybeck glanced around sharply. The car had already moved them past the black door. They were rounding a turn toward the end of the ride. They would be caught and at a minimum thrown out of the park. If the overtakers got hold of them, then things were about to get a lot worse.
There has to be emergency release.
He was trying to think like Philby. What would Philby do?
If a car stops, like a fire or something,
The belts would release. We're gonna have to move fast.
A rhinoceros-like dinosaur stepped out of the scene up ahead and lowered its head. It was going to headbutt them. Maybeck jumped from the vehicle. Nothing happened. He expected flashing lights and sirens for the vehicle to stop, but the car continued forward, aimed directly at the armor-clad beast with its head lowered. Maybeck tore a loose branch from a tree. He hurried up to the front of the research vehicle and swung the branch repeatedly at the vehicle's bumper and grille.
Terry!
There has to be...
Maybeck muttered to himself as he continued to bash the vehicle while he backed up toward the waiting dinosaur. His pants belt snagged on something on the front grille. If the beast charged now, it would crush him against the car. Again, he smacked the front of the car. It stopped. He knocked out a front sensor. Struggling to free his hooked belt, he turned and glanced over his shoulder. The dinosaur broke loose from his seam. The thing was definitely alive and charged. With the stop of the vehicle, an alarm now sounded throughout the building. Willa's seatbelt released, freeing her. She leaped from the back seat.
the black door.
Maybeck called out calmly. Again, he wrestled with his belt. Now he fiddled to unstrap it. He was stuck. The dinosaur snorted and charged down the track at him. Only at the last second did Maybeck spot a small pool of oil along the track. One of the vehicles ahead of him was leaking oil. As he noticed it, he elected to stay perfectly still.
Maybeck!
His belt still caught. Maybeck turned around and faced the charging animal. His belt buckle came loose and slipped out of the loops on his pants. He dropped to the floor. The dinosaur slipped in the oil and crashed into the front of the vehicle, demolishing the rover into a twisted V of bent metal. Maybeck was lying directly between the dinosaur's legs. He scrambled to his feet. Willa held the black door open. Maybeck ran like he'd never run. The dinosaur turned and followed, not slowing by the crushing impact with the vehicle. Maybeck literally dove through the black door. Willa swung it shut. The wall shook as the dinosaur impacted the metal door and the concrete firewall. Willa took Maybeck by the hand and pulled him to his feet.
You could have been killed!
I saw that his legs were like stumps. As long as I stay between them.
That was too big a risk to take.
It's not like I had forever to think about it.
He looked around. They were in a long, curving hallway. There were no markings on the gray walls. Overhead, hundreds of wires were carried into a kind of metal ladder that hung from the ceiling. It ran in both directions and out of sight. Among the wires were dozens of blue ones.
We follow the wires.
But in which direction?
This way.
But how do you know?
I don't. Some things you just gotta take on faith.
Faith? Is this you speaking? What have you done with the real Maybeck?
Give it a rest.
They were hurrying now, the alarm still sounding. Perhaps employees all rushed to assigned stations in emergencies, or to unload guests. Whatever the case, the hallway was empty. Maybeck moved not with his eye down the hall, but in the tangle of wires overhead. Willa did much the same.
There!
She pointed out a massive group of blue wires running from the wire carrier through a hole above the door to their right. Maybeck swung the door open. Workbenches ran along the far wall, covered with spare parts, shouldering guns, tools, and hydraulics. In the middle of the space to their left was a metal rack, floor-to-ceiling shelving holding dozens of computer screens, network hubs, and surge suppressors.
We've got it!
No, it can't be this easy. Philby said we should look for a closet or a bathroom.
But these are computer servers. It could easily be...
No, it couldn't be here. This ride used all the computers. The nerds that work on them would notice a server that didn't belong. Philby's gotta be right.
Then where?
The wires.
He hurried around the back side of the rack of the computers. There had to be several hundred wires, both blue and black. The blue wires interconnecting the servers and the hubs. The black wires ran to power supplies. Some of the group of wires were well organized and held together by plastic ties. Others had been added hastily and were in a tangled clump of spaghetti. Maybeck looked this all over.
We're not going to find it here.
How can you tell that?
Because the same guys that work the computers know the wires. They could spot the wires that didn't belong.
In this mess? I don't think so.
Willa stepped forward and dragged her fingernail along one wire, then another.
What are you doing?
Every girl knows that makeup can hide anything. The way you fool the nerds is you paint the blue wires black. Then they don't notice.
She cut herself off as her thumbnail flaked away some black paint, revealing the blue wire below.
Voila!
If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes.
Footsteps, coming fast down the hall.
The door.
Willa raced to the door and quickly spun the lock. The people in the hall ran past. She looked at Maybeck and rolled her eyes. That had been too close. As she rejoined Maybeck, he followed the painted network line to where it had been run along the underside of the bottom shelf. They traced it together and 3 others to the interior wall. Along this wall, another set of shelves to where a small hole had been drilled through some plasterboard. A door stood immediately to Maybeck's right, where a wall jutted out. He tried the knob, locked. Willa pointed to a small sign that identified the door. Janitor.
That's perfect. It's certain to have a drain, which is how Philby says they run wires around the park.
I need something the size of a credit card.
Maybeck looked at her curiously.
I have brothers who are constantly trying to lock me out of the bathroom. They think it's funny.
She found a metal plate on a workbench. She slid into the crack next to the door jamb, and the dark room popped open.
Sometimes I hate being an only child.
The room was a pile of junk, a neglected storeroom. It took a minute, but Maybeck located the server mounted beneath a photo-developing bench, a blue and silver Dell that looked a lot like a piece of home stereo. If they were right, this small box controlled all of the holograms of the animals they'd battled, and it possessed the power to erase them all.
What now?
We don't just pull the plug. I know that much.
A magnet! We need a magnet!
Together, the two returned to the workshop and began searching for anything magnetic. Willa found a couple of small magnets, but they agreed they wouldn't be powerful enough to do any real damage. They needed to rearrange all the magnetic information on the hard disk. It was going to take something.
There.
At that very moment, another line of footfalls had been coming down the hallway. The noise stopped just outside the door. A fist banged on the door.
Block it.
For what he'd spotted was currently up near the ceiling. It was a very large device with two metal plates connected by wires. It hung from the end of a hydraulic arm and was clearly meant to raise and lower heavy pieces of the dinosaurs that were under construction or repair. Willa rolled the tool chest in front of the door and then locked the wheels. Maybeck threw a switch and worked the hydraulic arm, attaching the magnet to the end of it. He found the power switch and tried it. A wrench and 3 screwdrivers jumped off of a workbench and stuck to the magnet. He'd gotten too close to the workbench, but he'd proven his point. He flipped off the switch and the tools dropped to the floor and a canopy of banging metal. Now the people on the outside of the door tried all the harder. Maybeck wrestled with a giant cotter pin that held the magnet to the arm. He got the magnet free, extended the wire connecting it, and was able to stretch it to all the way inside the dark room. The thing was massive. He knew it had to be right on top of the server to corrupt the hard drive. It took most of his strength to lift the magnet, and all of his strength to hold it under the counter and against the hidden server.
Throw the switch.
I'm a little busy here.
I can't hold it. Throw the friggin' switch.
Only he didn't say freaking. Willa abandoned the door and ran to the controls. She threw the switch. The magnet leaped out of Maybeck's hand and glued itself to the server. A small green LED on the front, meant to indicate the hard drive activity, turned to amber, then flashed red. Next, all the lights on the server failed completely, and there was a smell of electricity in the air. The second server was dead. Maybeck and Willa hugged, only to realize what they were doing. Then Willa pushed him away.
Don't disgust me!
Maybeck brushed off his clothes and quickly changed the subject.
I probably should have checked with Philby before doing that. I hope it doesn't mess things up.
The workroom door banging opened an inch, the tool carrier sliding onto the concrete floor. 2 inches, then 5.
What now?
Maybeck glanced overhead. It was a drop ceiling, maybe a foot or 2 lower than the one out in the hallway.
How are you with small spaces?
The 2 tigers vanished midair, as did 4 of the 6 monkeys and 2 of the orangutans. The big tigress from the shadows remained, and so did the massive tiger that had come from the hatch. Finn counted 2 monkeys and 2 orangutans, DHIs. Finn realized 2 of the tigers and several of the monkeys and apes had been holograms. No wonder his blows with the stick hadn't done much. Amanda's climb had distracted the charging animals just long enough for Finn and Jess to get past them. Meanwhile, Philby's team was about to defeat the second server. Now it was time to get out of there. Finn took off running. A caged-in jungle jeep appeared from over the rise, a flashing light atop its roof. The orangutans moved to intercept Finn. Jess ran toward Charlene and the wall, incredibly fast, and easily as big as he was, the apes came at Finn with wild eyes and drooling snorts of intention. The first of the 2 bounded toward Finn, made one gigantic leap, and would have torn his head off with its outstretched hand had the tigress not sprung. The cat scared the orangutan. The ape rolled into a ball, came to standing, and saw the cat bearing down one. The ape rolled into a ball, came to standing, and saw the cat bearing down on it once again. Forced to choose between pursuing Finn or confronting the cat, the orange ape turned to escape. Now faced with the jeep coming at it headlong, the orangutan sprang for the bamboo grove and disappeared, the huge cat following hotly on its tail. The second ape saw its panther flee and beat a hasty retreat. Thankfully for Finn, that retreat took it into the path of the jeep, which veered sharply to avoid a collision. The jeep skidded to a stop near the open hatch, away from Charlene, who remained poised, her stilts pressed at an angle against the wall. Jess was nowhere to be seen. She made it over the wall.
How about a lift?
Charlene bent low and offered her cupped hands as a boost. Finn climbed up, lay flat, and offered Charlene his hand. She took it, stood, and as rangers hurried from the jeep, shook her legs violently. She managed to kick one loose first, and then both of the stilts. Some of the ivy that connected her costume with the stilts tore loose. She left the rangers with the pair of stilts in their hands as she and Finn both lowered themselves down off the wall. Dozens of guests had gathered to observe the excitement. Some applauded as the Kingdom Keepers dropped to the path, but they didn't stick around to take a bow.
This way.
She led the others directly across from the formal gardens and into the jungle onto a route she now knew well. But just before they entered the dense jungle, Jess pulled to a stop, transfixed by something to her right. All the kids stopped and looked in that direction. They saw a snow-capped peak of a towering mountain.
That mountain was in my dream. The dream I told you about.
King of the Mountain, where you and Amanda were under attack.
Yeah.
Jez reached out and took Amanda by the hand. She said nothing, but the look that was exchanged between the two sisters would have quieted even the most cynical person.
It's Expedition Everest.
Then like it or not, that's where we're headed. Never once, not once, has one of my dreams lied to me.
Having reconnected on the DSs, all the Kingdom Keepers along with Jez and Amanda reunited on a small patch of jungle. Behind them towered Expedition Everest, and screams were heard periodically as the roller coaster thrilled its riders. After a quick celebration of Jez's return, Finn brought up the daydream she had while trapped in the tunnel.
But so what? We had two things to do, which was get Jess back and kill the second server. We've done both. I'm so tired I can barely stand. Let's get out of here while we still can.
You all can go. It's alright. They'll never be able to repay you for all you've done.
But your dream. The giant attacking you, Finn in his hands.
All the more reason we should just boogie and forget about that.
He looked to the others for agreement, but saw only vacant faces.
Come on, people. Quit while you're ahead. Ever heard of that?
Leave no stone unturned. It might be more appropriate. Wayne's gone missing.
Philby, cut the data lines. Who knows the effect of the data in the whole flow of the park? Besides, it wasn't Wayne. It was his VMK avatar. Are you kidding me? We're gonna stay and try to find a missing avatar? Are you serious? Half the park is out looking for us.
Maleficent serves Chernabog. We know that Chernabog defeated Mickey at the Phantasmic Show. Wayne told us that a long time ago. That means he has major powers. He's the one Disney demon that we know virtually nothing about.
And let's leave it that way.
But Jez dreamed something awful, and Maleficent could have hidden in any of the parks. Why here? Why now? What's being planned? With Wayne missing, it's up to us to find out.
You're hallucinating.
Philby stepped forward.
Without Wayne, we'd have failed. I promise you that. Maleficent's got him. Don't ask me to explain that, but I just know it. And if that's true, it's my fault. It's all of our faults. Can you honestly just go home and go to bed knowing that?
Maybeck hung his head and shook it back and forth.
No.
I don't think so.
Charlene unfolded the photocopied page of Jez's diary. She pointed to the sketch of what looked like a gorilla.
What if this isn't a gorilla at all? What if it's the Yeti?
You just told us that Chernabog was missing from his float, remember? Maybe Maleficent thought that was the real Chernabog, only to discover it was fake. The bat, the monkeys, something could have told her the real Chernabog was locked up here in Animal Kingdom.
Or maybe this whole thing was cooked up by Maleficent to use us to lead her to Wayne. Has anyone considered that possibility? What if we did exactly what she wanted us to do? We couldn't have gotten Jez without Wayne's help. She knew they'd be looking for him. So Maleficent cooks up this plan to basically use Jez as bait. We think she's after Jez to keep Jez's dreams from forecasting what Maleficent is up to. And that could be right, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't a bigger plan.
The ice truck!
Exactly!
But to what purpose? How do we know? Our refrigerator truck can take him anywhere he wants to go.
But where?
So, Expedition Everest was a way for Wayne and the others to control Chernabog? The Imagineers basically locked him up in a deep freeze?
It could be. They locked up Maleficent in the dungeons, let's not forget.
I say we get inside Expedition Everest and check out the Yeti. That could be where the answers lie. Jess drew it in her diary. It has to mean something.
It means that's where the danger lies.
Chernabog is using Maleficent, maybe to get him off of Everest, or even out of the park. Maleficent used us to reveal and capture Wayne. If they eliminate Wayne, then they take away years of knowledge about the parks, all the history of this place. If they're trying to gain control of the parks, Wayne has to go. He's proved that.
He has the knowledge and leadership to stop them.
Leadership, Finn thought. Wayne had given him a lecture on how to be a good leader. Had Wayne known what was coming?
Wayne is the only one that they need to get rid of. I'd say we've become a pretty big pain in the...
But there's obviously stuff we haven't figured out. Maybe a lot of stuff. It's pretty obvious we don't have it all. We can't make any conclusions without going there, without knowing more. I'm going in there, and I have a hunch Amanda and Jess are too, because Jess dreamed about it.
The two sisters nodded.
This is stupid. It could be a trap.
Which is why you, and Willa, and Charlene will remain outside of Everest. If we get nailed, you'll have to come save us.
Finn knew if there was one thing Maybeck loved, it was being the hero. Maybeck snorted.
Okay.
Philby will come with me because he's so good with the tech stuff. And if there's one thing we know about Expedition Everest, it's that it's high-tech.
I haven't studied it much.
We'll take our chances.
The park closes in, 5 minutes.
That may work better for us.
What about the fact that Jess's daydream has an 8-man swinging you around like a drumstick?
Maybeck crossed his arms, believing he'd finally found a hole in Finn's plan.
But what he doesn't know is that we already know that, and that's gotta be our advantage.
Not if you're the one being swung around.
I'll take my chances.
Finn stared at Maybeck's twitching smile, wondering why he'd volunteer. The line for Expedition Everest had been shut down 15 minutes prior to the park closing, making sure that the coaster was free of passengers by the time that was appointed. The line twisted through a startling reproduction of a Nepalese village complete with player flags and Asian memorabilia. Finn, Philby, Amanda, and Jess stuck together. They passed into the backstage area, a park rangers only gate, and simply walked into an enormous structure that housed the exotic roller coaster. Finn expected to need his ID and perhaps some quick talking to get them all inside. But with the closing of the ride to the public, someone had left the backstage door open and the kids simply walked in.
It's 3 structures in one. The massive superstructure that supports the exterior building, the roller coaster, and the Yeti.
I thought you hadn't studied it.
I haven't studied it thoroughly, but that doesn't mean I haven't read up on it a little.
We may need the roller coaster for our escape. Why don't you stay and try to handle that?
Done.
He could be a handful when he showed up.
See you up there.
The metal stairs reminded him of a fire escape. The 3 of them climbed and climbed. Then they climbed some more. Far below, they suddenly heard men's voices. The lights went out. Then a reverberating thunk as a door was slammed shut with a finality that Finn felt up his spine. With the lights out, the building's vast interior was held in an unnatural haze caused by a few emergency lights strategically placed throughout. No one said anything at first, but a tremor of fear passed between them. Finn couldn't lose the image of his being swung around by his feet. Step by step, he felt himself drawn to that fate. Amanda started talking, possibly to break the mood established by the lights going out.
What is it that something someone like Chernabog wants.
Power.
Exactly. He's been locked up in here ever since they built the ride. And now he wants freedom and power. Probably in that order.
And you're saying he'd have gotten both if I hadn't dreamed what I dreamed?
He still may get both. And what's the one thing anyone seeking power is afraid of?
What is this? A social sciences class?
Answer the question.
His enemies?
Yes, his enemies. In particular, any enemy who is potentially more powerful than he is. So, who are his biggest enemies? You, the Kingdom Keepers, or Wayne, or Jess, or whom?
All of the above. Or none of the above.
The stairs seemed to go on forever. The trio passed along the roller coaster's high-tech tracks and the Arctic scenery that only made the chill of the air all the more convincing.
You're messing with us?
Chernabog is rarely seen in any of the Disney stuff. Fantasia and Fantasmic are it, I think.
And all the postcards and stuff that show the Disney villains.
That too. But in Fantasmic, he's beaten by Sorcerer Mickey. And in Fantasia, by the sun.
Interesting.
She didn't sound winded at all. Finn wondered if she was levitating herself up the endless stairs.
Are you saying he has to defeat Mickey before he can be assured of maintaining any power he gains?
Defeating Mickey defeats us all. Without Mickey, there's no Magic Kingdom, no Animal Kingdom, no Disney at all.
But then why kidnap Jess? Why involve the five of you? What do you guys have to do with Mickey?
Nothing. That's what's puzzling. But think about it. The sooner he eliminates Mickey, the sooner there's no one to stop him from overtaking the park.
The ice truck just arrived.
Finn told the two sisters the news.
Then this is it. Whatever Maleficent has been planning, it's happening now.
They rounded a corner and then quickly jumped to one side to hide. What they'd figured they'd witness was emblazoned in their minds. Far above them towered the frightening figure of the Yeti. It stood 30 feet tall or more, leaning out over the track, the embodiment of evil, monstrous and otherworldly. At the Yeti's feet stood a tall figure in a black robe. They were too far away to see the purple fringe on the cape or the green skin, but no one in the group doubted it was her. Hidden by an outcropping of rock, they continued higher until the steady chanting of her voice could be heard. She was conjuring a spell. As the staircase curved, following the rocks, they were forced to drop to their stomachs and belly crawl up the metal stairs. Then Finn raised a hand, signaling the others to stop. He didn't know exactly why they'd come here, only that they couldn't turn away from Jess's daydream. Perhaps they were here to witness whatever Maleficent planned, perhaps to stop it. He believed their attendance here critical to Wayne's rescue, yet he knew they were no match for the Yeti, not if Maleficent awakened the thing. And it then became perfectly clear to him. They had to stop her from awakening the Yeti in the first place. Chernabog must not come to power. This was the secret to preserving the peace in the animal kingdom. This is why Jess had dreamed it in the first place. More than anything, Finn's concern for Wayne remained at the forefront of his thoughts. He had to find out what happened to him, where he'd gone, and to that end, he must not be afraid. This became his focus. He must not be afraid. He felt a tingling sensation wash over him. It was true. He did not see the green skin or the fringe on Maleficent's robe, and he was betting she couldn't make out the sudden slight shimmer to his skin either. He rose to his feet and called out boldly.
Do you really think you'll get away with it?
His electronic-edged voice echoed in the cavernous building. Amanda and Jess slumped back down, once again hiding in the lee of the rock outcropping. Far below, miles it seemed, a loud pop was heard, followed by a sudden humming. The round rail to the left of the stairs carried a slight tremor. The roller coaster had been switched on. It all happened so quickly, his words echoing around the building, the steady increase in electronic and mechanical sounds as the roller coaster started up, Maleficent's arms shooting up from her sides and lifting her robe like magnificent wings, the twitching of the Yeti's fingers like the paws of a sleeping dog. Too late. She already awakened the giant. His massive head moved side to side, and a loud crack thundered throughout the snow-capped mountains. The hum and the whirl of the roller coaster grew steadily closer.
Silly, silly boy.
Maleficent spun around and shot a ball of fire at Finn, the size of a soccer ball. It exploded at his feet, flaming out. And whereas once Finn would have been terrified by such things, would have stood transfixed by the power she displayed, something had overcome him. She was nothing but an illusionist, a magician using her substantial skills to scare him. He was no longer convinced she possessed the ability to kill him. Or if she did, then why hadn't she done so?
If you were going to kill me, then you would have done that the first time we met. But you can't, can you? Walt Disney would never allow a creation of his imagination to take a life.
But I'm not of his imagination. I am the old stories, tales that existed for hundreds of years, in places all around the world. Tales of things that actually happened.
She shot another ball at him. Again, he did not move from his spot. Again, the flames fell short. The giant Yeti was awakened now, towering over all of them, eyes blinking. Finn did not recoil. He could not picture Wayne and the other Imagineers building creatures designed to harm them. The roller coaster sped closer.
I will kill you when you are no longer of use. When Lord Chernabog has no further use for you.
She bent backward and looked up at the hairy creature above her. She let out a laugh, a blood-curdling cackle. That, for the first time, challenged Finn's DHI status. His feet and hands grew cold, and it took all of his will to overcome this poison and return to his full DHI. The beast had the reaction time of a snake. One moment Finn was standing on the stairs. The next, the Yeti had him by the legs and was swinging him overhead. His legs, not the legs of his DHI. Amanda and Jess jumped out from their hiding places.
Let him go.
If it isn't the fairies.
Amanda craned forward, her neck thrust out. Maleficent knew way too much. Finn knew the secret to his own survival was to push away his fear. But being swung at 30 miles an hour over the head of a 40-foot tall giant proved a difficult challenge. Maleficent suddenly floated, levitated off the platform. Clearly, nothing she planned for herself, for she flailed her legs and arms, dog-paddled like a kid struggling to swim for the first time.
You put me down, child.
She hurled a ball of flame at Amanda, who leaned slightly left, allowing the asteroid to pass. It exploded into the Himalayas.
Put him down, or I will drop you as you wish!
Maleficent moved like a puppet 20 feet to the left. Now there was nothing but a 60-foot fall to concrete beneath her. Finn felt the tingling returned, and as it did, the Yeti's hand closed shut through his body. Nothing but light. Finn clambered up the beast's arm towards its massive head. The Yeti swiped at him, but again, the hand passed through Finn's DHI, unable to touch him. He caught a glimpse of Maleficent as she began to transform into a crow. But as she did, Amanda released her and the green-skinned creature fell 15 feet straight down before stopping in midair.
You try that again, and I'll drop you before you have the chance.
Maleficent looked down and seemed to consider her odds. Then she looked back at Amanda.
You harm me, you little church. Your friend will never see his precious Wayne again.
With the mention of Wayne, Finn slipped. He fell off the Yeti's shoulder and the sensation immediately removed his DHI. He slid down to the side of the creature, grasping at the matted gray hair and somehow controlling his fall. As he reached the Yeti's leg, it moved. Then the other. The giant feet broke free of the platform where it stood for several years. The entire building shook. A series of screams was followed by the roller coaster shooting up at them through the darkness. Philby, Maybeck, and Willa zoomed past, backward and out of sight. Maybeck waved at Maleficent.
You will bring me the Stonecutter's Quill, or you will never see the white-haired man again.
At that moment, the Yeti began to change. The hair was sucked inside its arms, turning the gray skin smooth. The legs shrank and the neck grew thinner, while the head also lost its hair and sprouted horns. The giant creature had been reduced to a figure much greater than Maleficent, but no longer a 30-foot-high beast. Horns sprouted, while black webbing formed under the thing's arms like bat wings. Chernabog. Finn heard the roller coaster slowing in the distance. It would be returning, and when it did, he, Amanda, and Jess needed to be on it. The pen, Finn realized. The Stonecutter Quill was the pen Walt had used to imagine the first plans of the park. It had demonstrated great powers, the one and only time Finn had seen to use it. Powers, he assumed, that could be put evil... Powers, he assumed, that he could put to evil use as easily as there had been to good. A wall of tension formed between Amanda and Maleficent. The witch produced another ball of fire, but this time Amanda levitated it as well. It hovered next to the witch, burning hotly and illuminating her green face. Amanda released her again. Maleficent fell abruptly, before slowly being carried aloft. Evidence of the vulture was gone, the green-skinned fairy hovering over the precarious fall. The strain on Amanda was evident. She had quickly grown pale, her body now shaking. Finn saw that Maleficent was merely playing for time. She knew Amanda couldn't keep this up forever.
Release Wayne or she'll drop you.
The quill, or you will never see him alive again.
She looked over at Finn, who held to Chernabog rather than drop to the platform where the creatures might squash him like a bug. Amanda's strength gave out and she collapsed into Jess's arm.
You harm any one of us and you will never see that pen.
He let go, jumped, slid down the mountain slope and aimed straight for the two girls, hoping his timing was right, for he could see the roller coaster from the corner of his eye. Chernabog stepped down, raising his arms in defiance, but he was too late. Finn's wild slide down the mountain connected with both girls at the exact moment the roller coaster arrived. He stretched out his arms and caught both Amanda and Jess, his momentum carrying all three of them headfirst into the passing roller coaster. They tumbled into a middle car, but the safety bars on the ride were already set, having been locked at the start. And as the cars gained substantial speed, Finn held on to the weakened Amanda as Jess reached out to cling to the car. And with Maybeck, Philby, and Charlene and Willa calling out from the back, the Kingdom Keepers plummeted down into the dark. Chernabog moved with surprising agility for something that was a beastly demon with a pair of bat-like wings the size of boat sails. To the surprise of all, Chernabog made no attempt to stop the Kingdom Keepers. He flew toward the bottom of the ride. For once in his life, Finn willed the roller coaster to go even faster. He did not want to lose them. Finn had ridden on Expedition Everest before. Within a matter of seconds, they'd be thrown out into a spiral that would crush them against each other if they couldn't hold on tightly. Holding on with one hand each, he and Jess wrapped their free arms around the other's shoulders, and with Amanda pinned between them, leaned forward and braced for the spin-out. Expedition Everest roared into its climactic spiral, the G-force driving Finn and Jess to their right, their hands slipping along the restraining bars. The force nearly threw them from the car, but Finn and Jess together managed to keep Amanda pinned in. And soon the roller coaster began to slow to a stop. As it came to a rest, the restraining bars released, and Maybeck and the others hurried to join Finn, Amanda, and Jess. Finn left Amanda in the care of her sister and led the others throughout the building and out an enormous garage door that was standing wide open. They ran into the street where they caught a final glimpse of the back of the ice truck as it sped away.
What now?
We lost them.
But we can't let them go.
We got Jess back and we crippled the second server. I think it's safe to say that Jess and Amanda are now officially Kingdom Keepers.
He looked at each one of his friends. The others nodded.
We have work to do.
Let's get some sleep.
His suggestion was met with no resistance. The story made the morning news. A refrigerator truck, being driven poorly, had been pulled over by local police. The officer sworn that he'd been knocked over when he'd gone to open the back of the truck, and that two creatures had been seen hurrying away. He refused to describe them. He only said that they traveled in the general direction of Disney's Hollywood Studio theme park, and that from everything he'd seen, that is where they'd belong. For nearly 2 weeks, Finn, who had been grounded for a month, sneaked onto VMK the way Wayne had told him. He hoped to find Wayne by typing the name into a text screen. When the white hair avatar failed to appear, Finn organized the other kids, most of whom were also currently grounded. So it was exactly a month after the event at Expedition Everest. Finn went to sleep fully dressed, holding a small black remote button in his right hand. As he fell asleep that night, he intentionally dreamed of the Magic Kingdom, and he awakened there on the park bench, his body glowing under the moonlight. He was at the hub near the entrance, at the end of Main Street, USA. Soon the other Kingdom Keepers joined him. Only Charlene was still in her nightgown, having forgot to change into street clothes before going to sleep. Or maybe that's how she wanted to dress. The five headed up into the small apartment above the firehouse into the Magic Kingdom. It was exactly 12 midnight. This was Wayne's apartment. Most had visited before. There was incredibly sour milk in the fridge and food that now wore a coat of green fuzz. Wayne had not been here in a very long time. They searched for over an hour for the stonecutter's quill, but to no avail. If Wayne had hidden it, he'd hidden it well.
What now?
Is there any choice?
But without that pen, what leverage do we have? We can't win his release without that pen.
We'll think of something.
Or Jez will dream it and give us more clues to follow.
The point is, we did save Jez, and we pretty much saved the animal kingdom from being overrun by DHIs. We can't be giving DHIs a bad name after all.
They laughed, 5 shimmering kids, glowing as they enjoyed a rare moment of levity.
Maleficent used us to bring Wayne out of hiding. We failed him. And although we don't know enough about Chernabog, we've seen his power. And I have a hunch that the bat with the green wings was him all along. Although I am not sure how to explain that.
We know that even Maleficent cannot transform herself for very long, especially in this heat. She and her animal army may have been planning to take over AK. They had the ice truck as their backup, in case they failed. It was only when we crashed the server that she resorted to moving Chernabog. What's strange is that they hadn't captured Jez. If she hadn't been in that tunnel to have that daydream, we might never have known that Maleficent was planning. Might never have been there when she was freezing Chernabog.
I think it was intended, us being there. I think if we'd failed to defeat the server, then the animals would have caught us all and taken us to her. I don't know what would have happened, but I think she had plans for us. Amanda saved us all by levitating her. Without that...
I always thought staying up that late would be fun.
Sucked.
We've got work to do, and we need to act quickly. Who knows what secrets Wayne might have in that old head of his. Secrets no one should know.
Tell us what to do.
All eyes fell on Finn. They waited for him to say something. He smiled, a warmth filling him and making his DHI glow even brighter. Wayne would have been proud.
We'll meet after school. We've got to find Wayne.
He raised his right hand. In it was the black remote with the small button at its center.
Ready?
The others nodded. He pushed the button.